Yo. Yeah, I know it's the
taking the stand for a second day in the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Combs. This trial marks the first time the former couple is seeing each other since their split 6 years ago. Ventura, who is 8 months pregnant, was said to be rubbing her belly throughout her testimony while wiping away tears as she detailed, as she put it, the violent abuse she endured while dating Combs for a decade. You're watching Law and Crime. I'm your host, Kennedy Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. Cassie Ventura has spent the last 2 days in a New York courtroom testifying against her ex-boyfriend, music mogul Sean Combs, known as Diddy. Federal prosecutors claim Combs used threats, drugs, lies, and violence to coerce Ventura into sexual encounters with male prostitutes. Ventura testified that she participated in these freak-off sex parties because she feared Combs and wanted to make him happy, but felt disgusting and worthless because she didn't want to do it. She told the jury that the hip-hop star would, quote, knock me over, drag me, kick me, stomp me in the head when I was down. And that wasn't all. The testimony was extremely graphic. Ventura walked us through years of alleged physical abuse and sexual humiliation that she says she could not escape. She said she was 22 years old when Combs first proposed the drug-fueled sex parties, and they allegedly became weekly occurrences, reportedly happening in hotel rooms in New York City, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Miami, Turks and Caicos, and Ibiza. She stayed awake by taking drugs that she says Combs gave her, including cocaine, Molly, and ecstasy. Ventura said the freak-offs typically lasted between 36 to 72 hours, the longest one lasting 4 days, and that the frequent sex would often leave her ill and cause her to have constant urinary tract infections. At one point, Ventura told the jury about one freak-off where Diddy allegedly told her to get into an inflatable pool filled with baby oil and lube. Court transcriptions obtained by Law and Crime show the prosecutor asked, "Who, if anyone, asked you to get into the pool?" Ventura responded, "Sean, it was his idea." The prosecutor asked, "Did you want to get into a pool of baby oil?" Ventura responds, "At that point, I couldn't say no. It would have been all bad." After an objection, the prosecutor then asks, "What concerns did you have about not getting into the pool with baby oil?" Ventura responds, "That, amongst other things, just his temper. If that is something that he wanted, Sean wanted it to happen, that's what was going to happen. There wasn't another way around it." Ventura claimed Diddy controlled all aspects of the freak-offs, from directing her to find escorts, sometimes through Craigslist, the lighting in the room, to her nails having to be painted white, and what she wore. Everything, according to Ventura, had to go through Combs. He also filmed them. She claimed that when she would make him upset, he would threaten to release the footage. During that time, she says she took drugs to help her disassociate because she felt disgusting and humiliated. Like when she said Combs or male escorts would urinate on her. The prosecutor said, "Did you want Sean or an escort to urinate on you?" Ventura responded, "No." The prosecutor then asked, "And before that happened, what, if anything, did you discuss about being urinated on?" Ventura said there was no conversation, it was just a turn-on for him. Ventura testified that after sex acts with escorts concluded, Diddy would sometimes request that the escort's semen be, quote, put on his body in the next room. She was expected, she says, to have sex during her period and testified Diddy frequently got physically abusive. One of those times was caught on camera in this now infamous CNN exclusive video of Combs beating Ventura in 2016. Ventura said she was in a freak-off with Diddy and an escort, and it was a couple days before her first big movie premiere. She claims she tried to escape while Combs was in the shower, but he caught her before she could leave, kicking her and giving her a black eye. The prosecutor said, "How many times had Sean thrown you to the ground like that before?" Ventura responded, "Too many to count. I don't know." Combs denies all allegations. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to life in prison. Since his 2024 arrest, he has been held at the Metropolitan Detention Complex in Brooklyn. And joining me to talk more about this is former prosecutor Melba Pearson. Melba, thank you so much for coming on today. I don't even know where to start with this. You're a former prosecutor, so if you could just explain, how do you think the prosecution is doing so far?
Well, first of all, always great to be on with you, Kennedy. And I think they've really started off with the primacy and recency theory, which I'm a big fan of. It's always start with your strongest witness and end with a strong witness and bury kind of the details in the middle, right? Because that's what the jury remembers. And so they've started off strong. First of all, authenticating that video with a security guard talking about what he saw and the fact that Diddy paid him and all of that. So we know that this is a real video. It wasn't altered, nothing like that. And then Cassie now got on to talk about the context behind the video, what led up to it, and how that fit into the scheme of their relationship and the level of abuse that she suffered and endured through that whole time. So they've really done a great job with that. I'm very curious to hear from the other survivors. I know there's one is questionable whether or not she's going to testify, but the other, the one that goes by the pseudonym of Mia, should be up on the stand sometime this week. So I'm very interested to see what she has to say and how that also fits in to the wider scheme of Diddy using his power and influence to intimidate and hurt people.
I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this news package. Odoo is an incredible all-in-one business management software that every stage of your sales process. LC News CRM. And just speaking of that video, very, very sad, just being able to see that and seeing Diddy, watching it firsthand, kicking and punching Cassie Ventura. Also, the defense, they're trying to make it seem like that this video just shows that there's domestic violence. And they're saying that they, are not disputing that there was domestic violence in the relationship, but it has nothing to do with the charges that Sean Combs is being charged with. But Cassie, she took the stand saying that incident happened right after a freak off, or she was trying to escape when Sean Combs was in the shower. What do you think about that?
So the defense is going to do and work with whatever they can. They have a damning video. There's no way for folks to unsee it. We all saw it and we all know what it is. And that's why he had to come out, he being Diddy, had to come out and issue an apology and say that I'm a better person and all of this, right? But what's very critical here is not just the domestic violence, but the aspect of coercion. Because coercion is part of domestic violence from the standpoint of you feel that you have to do certain things to keep the peace, to avoid getting a beating, to avoid people you love being harmed, that sort of thing. And so that coercion is going to play a very critical role in terms of the trafficking aspect, because if she felt coerced that she had to go violence. And unless, God forbid, you've been in that kind of relationship, or someone you know or someone you're close to was in that type of a relationship, it's often very difficult to even conceptualize. But yes, sure, theoretically, she could have run out the door. But what happened in that video when she tried to leave? He beat her and dragged her back into the room. And not only that, after that whole incident occurred and she ended up being able to make it back home, he then showed up at her apartment banging down the door. So again, it's not like she didn't try to leave. She did. He just beat her every time she did. So I don't see that really panning out so well for the defense from that perspective.
And not just that, Ms. Ventura took the stand and was just detailing those freak-offs, those alleged freak-offs. How do you think the jury is processing all of this? I mean, Miss Ventura said that she was allegedly urinated on by Mr. Combs and by an escort, that she said that Mr. Combs told the escort to do these things, that all types of just nasty and gross allegations here. How do you think that that's playing out in court?
So my understanding is that the jury hasn't been very emotional in the way that, in other words, looking at them, you can't really tell what they're thinking, what they're feeling. It doesn't seem like anybody's recoiling in horror or anything like that based on what I've heard. So you never really know what goes through a jury's mind. I can't imagine they're getting a good night's sleep. Just from the perspective of you're listening and hearing some very, very vile things. And to even, again, conceptualize that happening to someone, and you're looking at a young woman who, was beautiful at the top, in her prime when all of this was happening to her. And you now see her as a mother, she's pregnant again. I just can't even imagine what's going through the jury's minds in terms of the pain, because again, Kennedy, we're used to watching these types of cases and, hearing these types of facts. And we still get shocked from time to time, but it's not the same reaction as someone who is kind of coming in with fresh ears and fresh eyes and hearing and seeing this type of depravity for the first time. So, I'm hoping that the jury, when this is all over, they seek counseling if they need to, because again, there's a lot of things that you're processing and have to unpack. And there is that possibility of getting what we would call like tertiary trauma, where you get traumatized by hearing the things that have happened to other people. And, you're thinking about, well, this could have been my daughter, this could have been my sister, this could have been my mom, whatever the case may be. Again, that's a lot for people. So I hope that they're trying to unpack this as best that they can. And if they need to, seek professional help after this is all over, because obviously a lot of these things you can't really share with the therapist while, you've sworn an oath that you're just going to listen and keep everything, especially when it comes to deliberations, private until the case is over.
Right. And we still have a long ways to go. I mean, we are only just a few days into this, and they're projecting that this trial is going to last 6, maybe 8, maybe 10 weeks. So there's still a long ways to go. And you brought something up that I think is important. Cassie Ventura is pregnant right now. She's about 8 months. I think right now. And one thing the defense wanted to do, they wanted to make sure that Miss Ventura, instead of showing her pregnant body, was already seated before the jury came in. But the judge did not go with that. And so they were able to see, and she, took her oath and they saw her pregnant belly. Can you just break down why would the defense not want the jury to see her being pregnant?
The defense wouldn't want the jury to see her pregnant because of the level of sympathy that the jury may have for her. Now, generally, we see a woman that's pregnant, we think, oh, motherhood, this is a wonderful time in her life, etc. And, there's this warm and fuzzy feeling you often feel when you interact or see someone who is literally about to give birth. And then to hear and kind of juxtaposition that beautiful kind of aura with this depravity and this, gross things that are happening, it's going to be hard for the jury to look at her and see the 19-year-old Cassie who, is not pregnant at the time and is, kind of beginning her life in her career versus the mother that they're seeing in front of them in the courtroom during these proceedings. So the defense was very concerned that her pregnancy would make the jury not only endear her to the jury, but also make the jury take her side and sympathize with her and not necessarily listen to the testimony fairly and objectively, but think, oh my gosh, she's pregnant, she must be telling the truth, or oh my gosh, I can't believe she went through that. Again, looking through the lens of her pregnancy and all of that.
And from inside the courtroom, from what I'm hearing, Mr. Combs and Ms. Ventura, they have not made any eye contact during Cassie's hour-long testimony. Do you think that there's a reason for that? Do you think that his defense attorney is telling him, hey, you're being watched, the jury may be looking at you, to just look straight ahead or to look down? What do you think the reason may be for that?
Well, again, the defense counsel may be advising him not to make eye contact with her, but we've seen in plenty of cases that defendants don't always listen to their attorneys, right? Sometimes to their peril, to their detriment. But it also could be just, again, this is awkward and uncomfortable, right? And he also does not want to be perceived as trying to intimidate her on the stand, because if they ended up like locking eyes and there was like an awkward moment, then the jury or others, watching, including even the judge, could be like, are you trying to intimidate her in some way? I'm not going to tolerate that sort of thing. So there's that. And then also, of course, Cassie, Miss Ventura, has no desire to look at him or to relive. She's already reliving some of the most horrible moments in her life. There's no need to lock eyes with the person who inflicted all of that upon her for years and years at a time. I've had many a domestic violence prosecution where the survivor literally turned their entire body to make sure that they couldn't even look at the person that abused them. So that is normal behavior, to not want to have eye contact with the person that abused you, that happens to be the defendant in the case.
And she's detailing a lot. Just moments ago, she was detailing, taking the stand, saying that during these freak-offs, she would often get urinary tract infections known as UTIs, that she would constantly get sick from just the constant alleged sex that she was, as she's claiming, forced to participate in, with these freak-offs. I guess if we could just talk about, with more of just the jury listening to this and the defense listening to this, when she does get cross-examined, how will, in your opinion, or how should the defense handle just crossing her?
Well, first off, I would expect that it would be a female member of the defense team that will be conducting the cross-examination, because the last thing you want to look like is a bully in the eyes of the jury. So I think taking the gender aspect out of it would be probably their best bet. And then, of course, you have to take on, cross-examination is very rarely a warm and fuzzy activity, right? So it's going to be direct, it's going to be painful, it's going to be challenging her credibility, challenging her recollection, and challenging her assertion that this was not consensual. So those difficult questions will need to be asked, and it's probably going to get very contentious. So, but again, you have to walk that fine line that you don't look like you're bullying her, but you're like, okay, yes, domestic violence did happen, since that's something that the defense already conceded to, but they need to focus on whether or not this was consensual and what evidence in their mind points to her having a consensual, not just a consensual relationship, but consensually engaged in these freak-offs for days at a time and used drugs consensually and willingly went into this situation, which is going to be difficult for them to prove.
Right. And we just mentioned, we can expect the defense to ask Ms. Ventura, well, why didn't you leave? Did you ever say no? Questions like that. But we all saw in that CNN exclusive video what happened when Cassie, allegedly said no, that she was kicked and beaten. Cassie also took the stand today and said that Diddy would often show her the freak-offs and tell her, allegedly, that he would release these videos, which obviously would be very detrimental to her and humiliating to her, for people to see her participating in these alleged acts. What would you say to that as well? The fact that she's claiming that, well, hey, he was trying to blackmail me, allegedly. How does the defense dispute that?
Well, again, it's one of those situations where it's his word against hers, so to speak, right? He hasn't testified. We don't know if he's going to testify. That's way down the road. But, the whole, it just, I'm sorry. Sometimes I have to take a moment because I just think about, what she's been through and how, you see just this beautiful young woman who is just, thrust into such a situation that she probably didn't even have the maturity to be able to deal with. But, again, in terms of seeing these videos, it's part of the coercion aspect. Because again, it's, if you don't do this, I'm going to release these videos for your mother to see, for your friends to see, for other record labels to see. So if you're thinking about leaving me so that you can hopefully pick up with your music career, because remember, they came together at first after she signed a music deal with Bad Boy Records, and she was under the impression and understanding that she would be able to record and release more albums, and he never allowed her to do so. She wanted to leave and then start her career over again with a different manager and a different record label. Well, now there's this video out here that makes it incredibly difficult for her to do so. So it all speaks to the coercion and forcing her to do these horrible acts, again, to preserve her reputation, to preserve her family, to avoid shame, and to also preserve her safety.
Would you recommend Mr. Combs taking the stand, or do you think that's not in his best interest?
I mean, as a former prosecutor, I'd love for him to take the stand just to have that option to be able to tear him apart limb by limb. But if I was his defense counsel, I'd be like, sit down and hold your position. Keep your mouth shut. Because more often than not, defendants harm themselves when they get on the stand and testify in their own defense. Sometimes it's inescapable, especially if you have a self-defense claim, stand your ground, something like that. But that's not what is at play here. So basically, if I was defense counsel, I'll say, don't say anything, don't take the stand, and let me argue reasonable doubt. Let me argue the fact that the prosecution has not met their burden. Let me point to all the holes in the prosecution's theory or in the prosecution's evidence or any inconsistencies between Cassie's testimony and the lady known by the name of Mia or any other folks that may testify, witnesses that may testify throughout the pendency of the trial. So that would be my plea. But again, at the end of the day, it's solely within the defendant's hands. So again, many times defense counsel tells their client, do not testify. But the client's like, you know what? I want to be heard. I want to tell my story. Sometimes that works out well, but more often than not, it does not work out in the defendant's favor.
Absolutely. And the defendant, he has, a strong support system backing him. His mother, Janice, his children have been in the courtroom. What do you think is the strategy behind his children, especially his young teenage daughters, being in the courtroom, listening to these just gross and nasty allegations being made by Miss Ventura? Why have those, children, you can say these teenagers, listening to these things?
Children that were basically close to the same age as Cassie when she first started being brutalized by Diddy. But I think it's the defense strategy is that point counterpoint, right? Like you see him sitting there, like, again, based on the pictures, because of course no cameras are allowed in the courtroom, but he's over there trying to look like Daddy Huxtable in his fluffy sweaters and whatnot. And then you have the kids behind him and his mom, and he's giving the heart emoji symbol and all of that. So it's trying to make him more like he's a regular guy. He's a flawed human being, but he's a regular guy. He's not a criminal. This is just a misunderstanding, or worst case scenario, this is someone who's trying to take advantage of this, family man who again has his flaws, but he certainly isn't this horrible, abusive, manipulative person that they're all making him out to be. So that's why the kids and the family are in the courtroom. I just hope and pray that the family, especially the kids, are getting some sort of support, especially in terms of mental health and all of that, because they're hearing things that they have no business hearing. Okay. They're hearing things that are incredibly violent, that are incredibly troubling. They're seeing snippets of the video. They're seeing the entire, and when I say snippets of the video, they're likely going to see snippets of the freak off videos, or at least stills, something so that the witnesses can authenticate what happened and point to who the different sex workers were, et cetera, to kind of help build out the prosecution's case. But they're going to see all of that. And that's a lot. That is a lot to have to conceptualize and grasp, and also be like, that's my dad, but that doesn't square with the dad who raised me and us hanging out and playing video games or going to lunch or whatever the case may be. So that can be incredibly confusing for them. So hopefully they are getting some kind of psychological help to be able to grapple with what they're hearing, as well with coming to terms with who their father is.
Absolutely. And do you think that helps his, because I'm still just confused as to why have a 17, 18-year-old there listening to this? Do you think that does help his case for the kids to be present during this time? Because they could be present when other people are testifying, but knowing that this is what they were most likely going to hear, the defense knows what Ms. Ventura was most likely going to say. I'm just trying to figure out, does it help? Is the reason why they're there because it makes Mr. Combs look better? Because on the other end, some people are saying, hey, this is making him look worse, that this is all being put out on Front Street while his kids are sitting right behind him.
Yeah, I don't know what the defense strategy was on that in terms of how they thought that this made the most sense. I would have opted for maybe having them present for opening and closing statements and, again, certain select days. But when the most salacious testimony is being revealed in court, I don't think that's any place for a 17 or 18-year-old. But we will see at the end of the day whether or not this was a good idea. But I don't
and we have weeks more left to go. This was extremely salacious, and it hasn't even been one full week. What can we expect in these next 7, maybe even 8 weeks?
More of the same. More of the same, because there's more survivors that are going to come forward and speak about what happened to them. There's certainly going to be more evidence in terms of all the bottles of baby oil and other pieces of evidence that the federal agents were able to impound when they conducted the searches of his homes and businesses or whatever the case may be. So all of that is going to be coming in. Now, some of that physical introduction of evidence might not be as salacious. It's just might actually be a little boring, but again, it's necessary in order to move the case forward. But I think this is going to be a roller coaster ride for all of us in terms of what we're going to hear and how that squares with the public image of what we had of Diddy for so many years.
Absolutely. Well, this is something that we will be following closely here at Law and Crime. Melba, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ken.